Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live stream Q&A time. I trust that we find you well. As we continue to journey through the challenging times as a community, as well as even a nation, I would particularly like to recognise and thank each parent for the part that they have played in helping us to ensure that the spread of the COVID-19 has been minimal, and by continuing to embrace the social distancing strategies that we've been called to do. See, you parents, you've been at the coalface of this because of these strategies, and ultimately it has been you at an individual level as a family by playing your part that has actually helped our community, our state and our nation to flatten the curve so successfully. So that's why we want to say to you, thank you and bless you. I'd also like to just take this opportunity to affirm all of the families that have taken up the opportunity to seek either financial or pastoral care support. We have just counted it such a privilege to be able to stand with these families. And we would also encourage all of our families that they would continue to seek out this support in the future as required. I'd like to lead us in a time of prayer, so let's pray together. Gracious God and Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the gift of life to be able to enjoy this day. We also thank you for the community that we know as Heathdale. And even though we may be connecting at this moment through an online or a virtual experience, we are able to connect as a community because you are the heart of our community. So we just really ask that you will bless this time together, Father. Continue to give us the strength and understanding of how to walk our way forward during this challenging time. But above all, everything that we do, we bring honour and glory to your holy and precious name. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Today I'm joined by Lynn and Deb. So obviously, for those who don't know, Lynn Moffat is our principal of the primary school at Werribee campus, and Deborah Letcher is the principal of the secondary school campus at Werribee as well. And we'd like to just take the opportunity to directly answer any of the questions that you may have. You know, and you can actually start sending these questions through right now by simply putting your questions into the chat section of Teams. And we actually have a team who are working behind the scenes who are gathering up these questions and then will present it to us. And then these two ladies and I will hopefully be able to answer each of the questions that you ask. But before we actually answer your questions, Lynn and I would like to take a few moments to talk to you about remote learning and how we have elected to deliver this at Heathdale Christian College. You see, every school, whether at a state, Catholic or independent, are tailoring the delivery of remote learning to their particular school community. And we would like to further explain how we are tailoring our remote learning to our community. But Lynn will probably pick up more so on that in a moment. So I'm going to leave that for you, Lynn, so you enjoy. But last week you should have received from me an email that attempted to address the mixed messages that we were getting and receiving between the federal and state governments and their advice on how schools should be operating. You know, this isn't their first stoush and between both levels of government. And I actually would predict that this won't be their last stoush either. But the impact is it creates confusion rather than clarity. And instead of working together or working in unison, a division has been created. And this is really unfortunate for all of us. But I want to say to you, as a follower of Jesus, who desires to honour and fulfil the calling that's been placed on my life to respect and honour the leaders of this land, I find it an absolute challenge to be caught up in the middle of this stoush. And as I sit in this space, I think to myself, as the executive principal of this community, I will always continue to prioritise the well-being in terms of health and safety of all members of our community, and especially those in our students. So this is why, when I am caught in the middle of conflicting advice on how schools should be operating, I first sought the advice of Victoria's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Brett Sutton. And then along with that has been the State Minister for Education, James Merlino, and our peak representative body of Independent Schools Victoria's CEO, Michelle Green, to help me to make the decisions I need to make. And I seek these people out because they will always give me advice from a Victorian perspective. And see, the decisions that I have to make are far too significant for me to make these in isolation. And to make wise and informed decisions, I need the best advice. And it has been these people who have provided this for me for over the past 2 months. And as we continue to move forward, I will continue to seek wisdom and guidance from these people. You know, in the midst of all the confusing chatter of what schools will and won't do, I just would like to take a moment to remind you of something that I said to you at the start of this term. And that's when I informed this community that we would continue to deliver remote learning until the end of May. And our position has not changed on this. We will continue to do remote learning until the end of May. Yes, we've made some tweaks, such as on-campus supervision for the children of essential workers and then students who are at risk. And even today, our kinder program was open to all families with kinder kids. And in addition to this, we've allowed some of our VCE students to come on campus to do some of the tasks that they just cannot do in a remote context. But for all other students, remote learning is the mode in which we will deliver the Heathdale curriculum until the end of May. On May 11th, Professor Sutton is due to meet with the State Cabinet and to provide them with the latest update and to help them also to work through whether this current state of emergency needs to begin to be lifted. And once this decision has been made, I am sure that there's going to be additional information that will be provided to us, and specifically about schooling. But while we wait for this latest update, behind the scenes, as I've had my team and I, we've already started a series of conversations of how we will transition all students from learning remotely to campus-based learning. What we've done is we've started to identify the key pieces in this process and how they will then be mapped out to ensure that the transition back to campus-based learning is both smooth and successful for both our staff and students. Now, I need to say, we have not put any times on these steps yet because our focus is making sure that we get the sequence right. And the timing of our sequence will be informed by the announcement that is made on May 11 by Professor Sutton and Premier Dan Andrews. And then, once we have a clear plan with times and dates associated, we'll then let you know what's happening. So in the meantime, we simply ask for your patience and continued prayers as we continue to work through what our transition plan will look like. And as I conclude, I just would like to share with you one last thing. You know, you may have noticed over the weekend, there was much spoken about how being removed from the classroom will negatively impact students' learning. Well, last week I came across a really interesting article that was reported in The Age. It was an interview with Professor John Hattie, who is a world-renowned academic on building an effective learning and teaching environments. Professor Hattie happens to lecture at Melbourne University. So not only does he understand a global perspective on what's happening, but he also understands the intimacy of what's actually happening within our Victorian context. You know, when in this article, he commented on a study that was conducted by the New Zealand government after Christchurch was devastated by the massive earthquakes. You know, the devastation was so severe that schools were completely closed for term. And during that time, there was no teaching or formal learning that took place. It was then followed through a transition period to ultimately become back to a point where all learning was happening back in schools. And Professor Hattie said one of the findings of this study was that the Christchurch students actually outperformed all other students across the nation, and especially those in their final year of schooling, or in our language, our BCE students. And he then went on to comment that the finding of this study was that upon the return to teaching, it was the teachers who ensured that the students learnt the essentials. And then it was the teachers who are able to find creative ways to support each student so that they experienced learning success. I sat and I reflected with that finding. And then I started to think about the team here at Heathdale Christian College. And I thought, likewise, I just know our staff have already and will continue to support your son and your daughter so that they will continue to experience learning success. And our staff will find those creative ways to nurture students and enable them to continue to experience learning success. And so this is why I commend to you the teaching staff here at Heathdale Christian College. But that's enough from me. I want to give Lynn an opportunity to speak. And she's going to share with you some of her reflections with regards to remote learning. So thanks, Lynn. Over to you.
Thank you, Ross. It's great to be with everyone this afternoon. And I always like to take this opportunity to say hello to those students that are out there that are working so very hard. I've heard of so many teachers telling me that they are doing such a great job. So well done, students. We are going to be really looking forward to seeing you back at school and sharing your stories and adventures with us. We do miss you, and I know you're missing some of your friends and teachers too. So we're going to keep trying hard and do our best. So well done, students. Well, parents, it certainly has been an incredible journey for you, and we are continuing to pray for you. We know it is a difficult balance, teaching students at home and working and all the things that entails. But do you know, I do believe that we will emerge from this with newfound strengths and knowledge and skills, and your students will have determination and they'll have learning that this opportunity will bring. So we will see some of that evidence when we come back. And at the moment, your students are learning that flexibility is required in this world, and we're all learning that, aren't we? But it is part of learning for life. So we are looking forward to seeing our students at that time. So our students, we know, are very adaptable and they're skillful. We've seen it. We see them when they are here. And I know that there'll be evidence of new initiatives from your children and creative ideas, and you'll be seeing them today as well. But what we wanted to do with our remote learning was to promote learning to suit every student. And so that is a blended version of remote learning. It's got a digital component, and of course it's an individual learning program for your child. We know that at this moment, as children are beginning to move into remote learning and what that routine means, they are starting to ask themselves perhaps, and perhaps you're prompting them too, how do I learn best? That's a great question to ask. We're still asking it, aren't we, Mr. Grace? But improving and developing the program to suit your child is really important for us as teachers here at this school. We want to hone our delivery and make sure that it is pertinent and practical for your children. So we'll keep on refining what we do, and we want to make sure we're capturing the interest of your children as well. Our goal is always to benefit every single student just where they are at, and to continue to build in them that creativity and individual learning goals that each of them does have. Well, what will emerge from this? Well, I believe learning with delivery intent towards flexibility to suit students and families will be one of the things that we will take from this. Our teachers are very keen to respond to all parents' questions, and they'll do that as soon as possible. So please keep those queries coming to your teachers. We wish to also provide a high standard of curriculum programs and make it accessible to every student in their situation. As you know, Canvas onboarding has been an incredible bonus for us in primary. It's happened very quickly, but we are so amazed at how quickly students have taken that on board. They're learning about digital citizenship. What a great skill for the future. They're learning about having responsibility for their learning and also learning how to discern what is good and what is right and what is helpful. We want to increase the capacity for quality delivery of online teaching videos. We're seeing some great videos going out there. I hope you're enjoying them. But those videos are made to be focused on the topic and delivered in a timely and supportive way for student learning. We want to make sure that our students learn in this new world paradigm that access to learning anytime is really valuable. And of course, at this moment, as your home situation permits. Our children are learning how to pause a video lesson. They're learning how to revisit topic interest, and they're learning how to complete the task and then to resume it if they haven't quite finished it. They're great skills. Our curriculum delivery is topic intentional. All our teachers across both campuses are working as year level teams and is in the subject areas that they work in. And they are deciding on the delivery that is the best for your child at this time. Of course, there's going to be more scope for new initiatives as we go down the path, challenges for students to be involved in. For instance, chess competitions. At the moment, there's a walk around Australia. We're all doing that. There's maths games to be involved in, and there's reading challenges coming up, and there's more to come. So we're looking forward to those extras. Well, what have we seen and observed? We know there's been some difficulties that you have experienced, and us too, in this fast-paced rollout of blended learning and remote learning and digital learning. We know that there's been so many emails in your inbox, and we know we've needed to address queries from you, but we will continue to do that. Our intention in all of this process is that we have our staff on hand to you as parents to connect and to help you through this process. We want to make sure there's a balance of delivery for your child, that there's conferences that they're involved in, and that there are also phone calls going back and forth from school to home so that we can have those queries answered. We want to make sure, of course, we capture every student as best we are able. And we do really thank you for your patience and perseverance with us during this time. Well, we've got more work to do. We are aiming to have more observation of student learning occurring. That is increasing in Memento at the moment, so that's great. We want to make sure too there's opportunities for students and teachers to communicate regularly. The Canvas program, the platform that we have rolled out for all primaries, is much easier to use for preps to fours, so that they become more familiar with it and how to negotiate, how to move around that platform as well. And of course, we want to consolidate the use for grade 5 and 6 and strengthening student responsibility and to complete tasks that they're required to. So that's a work in progress, which we will keep supporting our students in. We are hoping to measure growth of children's learning, and we're working on that now. We want to empower our students to make sure that they are ready for learning and discerning of how they learn best. We want to simplify the delivery to the maximum benefit for every child. We want our students to be asking, now what did I learn in that lesson? What did I learn today? Help them to become reflective thinkers. We are working on a new semester report at the moment that will be adapted for remote learning, but we'll give you more information about that soon. We've had some parent feedback, and some of that feedback has helped us to respond in these ways. First of all, to streamline Canvas pages. That's an ongoing process, particularly for our younger students in primary. We have, as you know, had on-site supervision for our students who need to be at school. We're working with those students to make sure they're logged in and able to do some of their tasks here. We have some of our teaching staff and learning assistants popping in just to make sure they're on track at times. As you heard, the kindergarten's open today. It's great to see students in that space playing together. And of course, we're supplying support for our students through our learning enhancement team of staff. Individual work tasks that are more pertinent to individuals. We want to make sure children have printed explanations of their work at times, and we want to make sure that the program your children are receiving suits them and they are able to complete that. So parents, we do acknowledge the partnership and support that you give us, and of course we'll continue to work to give to you as well. And as a community, I'm sure we're going to come back stronger. We are going to build our hope and our trust in God in these days to come. It's a great place to be. We will cherish more and more those close family ties and the family moments that you are experiencing now, not without their challenges, I'm sure. But the broader local community around us too, we understand that we're held together in uncertainties and we can work together and we can help each other through them. And we will be ready to change direction when it's required, and we'll do that as efficiently as possible. We'll work hard to make sure that's the case. We will aim high in our expectations as a professional teaching community for your children's benefit. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Much appreciated. As I said to you earlier, that there's a chance for Lynn and Deborah and myself, as well as we have Kathy Ward and Joe Harworth. So Kathy, who is the head of learning module from Kinder to Year 2, and Joe Harworth, who is the head of learning module from Years 3 to 6, also in the background, ready to answer any of your questions. So if you've started to send some questions through, fantastic, because we've actually got a team who are actually organising and gathering these questions and then bringing them up for us and giving us the opportunity to answer. So if you haven't started throwing a question in on the chat line yet, please do so now, because that's the purpose of this time. Let's continue to answer some of the questions. So a first question up there seems to be, and I'm going to see which one of you two I might throw under the bus straight away. No, I won't. It's there is competing advice from, and it reads this: there is competing advice from federal and state governments and health authorities, which you mentioned. Why are we choosing to follow the state advice rather than the federal advice? And why is this different to kindergarten? Lynn, I might go first a little bit on that. You might want to pick up on the kindergarten part if that's
Certainly.
okay. But let me say thank you for that question. It's a really good question because it actually speaks into the very thing that we've been saying about the conflicting and mixed messages that we've been going through. As an independent school, we do actually need to listen to both the federal and the state governments, because in the federal government is the main body that actually sources our funding. So we get 50% of our income through the federal government. Yet as an independent school in Victoria, we are actually registered under the BRQA, which is a Victorian government authority. So we actually need to listen to the Victorian context as well as the federal context. But probably the reason I'm saying that we will, and why I go to Professor Brett Sutton and James Molino as the State Education Minister, and also Michelle Green as the CEO of ISV. Why do I go there? Because there's a Victorian context. Is it because I want to reflect the words that our Prime Minister said just over a week ago? Here's what we'd like to do as a nation, but each state needs to make its own decisions because each state's context is different. So, and it's state and territory. So, for example, if you look at what's happening in the Northern Territory at the moment, it is a completely different state to what conditions that are actually happening compared to Tasmania or to South Australia or to Victoria. And so the Northern Territory government have made decisions for their particular area. And same with the Western Australian schools have made, and New South Wales schools. So we will take, and the reason we are listening to the Victorian advice is because it has the Victorian context, and Professor Sutton speaks into what are the conditions that we are facing here in Victoria. So that's the main reason that we listen and will respond and follow the Victorian advice. Lynn, but why is it different for kinders compared to prep to 12?
Yes, very good question. Well, we're blessed to have a kindergarten on our
That's right.
site, aren't we? It's just a lovely way for our families to join Heathdale community. Our kindergarten is actually registered by the state government. We receive funding from the state government, and therefore our focus is to follow the guidelines that the state government is giving us in our kindergarten program here. So that was why we've opened for those families who wish their children to be here. We follow all of the regulations from the department regarding the kindergarten operation, and there's quite a few of those to do. And so that's one of the reasons why it's a little bit different to the whole college process.
Yeah, that's right, because the rules that sit around kindergarten and early childhood are a bit different from prep through to year 12. And this is where the state government has actually said they want childcare and early childhood open, and hence why they went and made that really strong statement really from on. So that hence the difference. So thanks, Lynn, that's good. Next question has come our way. Is there going to be semester awards assembly for both primary and secondary school? Hey, what a great question. Lynn, you've done a fair bit of talking. I'm going to give you a chance to draw breath for a second. Why don't we ask Deb to kick off and say, Deb, from a secondary perspective, talk to us about mid-year assemblies.
Yeah, well, our mid-year assembly, whether that's in person or online, will be a really interesting question. And as we know, we won't really know until after May 11 what the Victorian government's advice is going to be about whether we come back. So we would obviously like to recognise the learning that's been going on in semester 1. The form that will take will depend a little bit on whether we're back on campus or not, and whether that's going to be soon or a little bit further away. I'm sure Lynn will say the same thing to primary, that we're doing assessment to prepare for the mid-year reports, and it's usually that information that we then base on the kind of awards that we give, certainly at secondary level. And we've announced today that we won't be doing our mid-year exams at year 7 to 11 at mid-year, because we want to concentrate on that face-to-face teaching. But we will be still having those assessment tasks that will enable us to recognise students and their progress. So watch this space for how we deliver that best.
So for you, Lynn, in the primary school?
Absolutely. Look, I think at the moment we're making sure that our teachers and the students are connecting. We're starting to have observations about how the children are going in their learning, and certainly we'll be looking at how we can acknowledge those children that have gone over and beyond. So we will certainly have an ongoing conversation about that. We'd love to have an assembly, and like you, Deb, that's going to be something we'll have to plan a little bit further down the track, what that might look like.
I love the heart of you two ladies. So I actually asked you about, was it an assembly for awards, but both of you actually first and foremostly talked about the importance of assembly being a community gathering time, and actually it's a celebration time, and one of the celebration is the academic achievements of some of our students. But so good on you two. I love your style and the fact that you one way or another, there's no way you're not going to have an assembly, is there? So we'll find a way to do that. So that's good. There's another question now about fees, and it's a question that's has been asked a few times of me directly, and but today it's are there going to be any further reduction on fees? Well, first of all, I'd like to, so I might take this one unless you two are desperate to talk about fees at all. No, okay, thank you. Okay, so what I wanted to say is, firstly, when the board and I met and we talked about the way Term 2 was looking with remote-based learning, we also recognised what was happening with the threat of COVID-19 and the impact upon our families and our community, that the board and I worked through a series of strategies of what to do and how to support our community. We actually deliberately did not take the decision of what other schools have done in terms of automatically giving Term 2 fees back. What we did was firstly said, let's actually look at, rather than just have this one size fits all strategy, let's tailor our response so that we can support the families who need the support and where it is best to give that support. So that's why we first went with, if there's anybody who needs some support through paying their fees, come and talk to us about it. And there was 3 options that were given to there, that whether it be a situation of deferring of fees, restructuring your payment plan, or even seeking out a concession. I'd like to say to you that every family that approached us and requested either one of those 3 options was granted their options of their request and supported in that request. And we've also said to them, when you come to the end of term 2, if you continue to need this support, please come and see us again, because we will find a way that we will continue to stand with you. So that was seen as our first initiative. Our next initiative was looking at the credit back through the Educational Resources Levy, as well as the Volunteer Services Levy. And we saw that that was an option that we were able to give to every family that just gave a little bit of relief that could help towards that. And as we said, it was on an average of $425 per family. So it was a sizable sort of option, but it was an option that was made available. And in my letter, that when I announced that to, I actually said, here is an initial response, because the last part of our strategy was that we were going to adopt a wait and see. And let's see if that we are able to effectively deliver remote learning. What the evidence I've been able to see so far from not only what the staff have prepared, but what the students have actually sent back, I'm actually really seeing a really strong and capable delivery of the Heathdale curriculum via remote learning. However, we've said that if we genuinely felt that all our students were disadvantaged, severely disadvantaged through remote learning, that we would consider an additional credit back in some way, shape or form. But we would not do that as an initial one. And so that's where we stand at the moment. So if there is a need for an additional fees credit, we will consider that. But if there's not, we will continue to move as we are at the moment. So that's sort of where the state of play sits with fees. Another question has come through is, how many primary and secondary students are going to, not how many, how are, I need to learn to read these questions really well. I need to go and see a primary teacher. How are primary and secondary students going to be assessed in term 2 and as they do their remote learning? Or are there tests and things like normal from there? So, Lynn, if you'd like to start with that, and then I'll get you to follow up there.
Thank you very much. Yes. Well, assessment's always a question, isn't it? And our students love to be able to do their little spelling tests and get their marks and see their marks uploaded. And we'll continue to do that as remote learning continues. The children are learning to upload the work that they're doing onto the Canvas platform. So that's great. And we'll continue to see the teachers looking at that work and seeing their progress. And of course, there's also term 1 that we've had already this year. So we've been able to collect quite a bit of assessment tasks in the first term of this year. So semester 1 reports will be a half-year report. And as I mentioned, there will be some modification to that to reflect the remote learning situation. So that's a great question. We'll continue to talk to our teachers and teachers with their students. Students will be able to show their work, even by photos and videos that are coming back, Mr. Grace. There's amazing work the students are doing back at home. So we're collecting all that evidence and it forms part of our assessment of students and their learning. Of course, we want to see growth. That's the whole purpose of assessment.
That's good. Thanks, Lynn. Deborah?
Well, I just take my hat off to our primary teachers. 5-6, of course, has had Canvas for a couple of years now, but have used it in a much more extensive way during this time. But Prep to 4 have just taken up Canvas in such a short period of time, and I know how much work it has been for us at secondary over a number of years. So it's amazing to see what our teachers have been able to do with Canvas in such a short period of time. And of course, both for primary and secondary, Canvas gives us that option to have students submit work, whether that be assignment type work or whether it be timed quizzes and online tests. We're able to do that through our Canvas platform. So in secondary, we are adapting our usual assessment tasks to make them online tasks. That, of course, is different at different year levels. It's much easier to get a year 9, 10 or year 8 student to do an online test successfully than maybe a smaller, younger student who's only just learning the platform. But as they get confident, and I imagine as it's age appropriate, your teachers will do that as well. We, of course, want to do assessment during this remote learning period because the last thing we want is for students to finally get back on campus and then find all their time is taken up with getting through a whole stack of assessments rather than enjoying teaching and learning time in a more dynamic way with their teachers. So I would say, the same as primary, we're adapting our assessment time to fit into this remote learning time so that we're able to accurately measure progress and then deliver that to parents in the form of reports.
Yeah, that's good. And I must admit, I also really want to acknowledge the thing that you've said there about assessment. Assessment isn't only in the form of a test and an exam. When we actually assess our students' work, and Lynn made reference to it, it was actually about the way they go about their work, and also how they've even, like I'm thinking about a particular maths task. Sometimes it's not about the answer; it's actually the process that and show you're working out, and the importance of showing you're working out of how you got to the answer was the significant thing. The other thing too, we've always talked about with assessment, why it's important, is it's not to do with assessment to give a mark so that we can then give a report at the end of semester, but actual fact that that the real driving thing around assessment is actually the feedback to the students. And you touched on this, Lynn, the feedback of the students about this is what you've done really well, and then this is what you need to do to improve. And I think that's, so the sense of us not doing any assessment during this period actually works against our sense of what it is to be a teacher. So yeah, thank you for being able to say that. So question 5 that's come our way, or the 5th question that we've received today, is my kids are sent to school 1 day a week as an essential worker. I find that they are not performing as well as they are in the classroom. So what resources are there to help the students who are sent to school during this time? Lynn, do you want to pick that up first?
I would like to pick that up, actually. I actually popped into the computer lab today and saw some of the children in there hard at work. And I must say I was very impressed. But children being children, they will come to a different situation on a day like today. And it's not a schoolroom, but they are learning. They're doing their work, which is lovely, but they're also playing. They're having some downtime, just as children would if they're at home. Look, I would suggest that if your child is not quite coping with some of the work that's being delivered while they're here on campus, please talk to the child's teacher. And I'm sure the teacher will be able to put in some good assistance and help for those particular children.
Did you want to add anything any further, Deb?
Well, I think whether it's on campus or at home, all of our students are in a situation where they're learning in a really different way, and that's going to take some adjustment. And it may be that, you know, for a period of time, they don't necessarily display the same work at home, the same level of conscientiousness when they don't have their teacher right there in front of them. But as we as parents support them and the teachers support them, we'll find that they come to a level and they start to adapt. And so I think we've got to have some understanding as students move into this time and they renegotiate what learning looks like for themselves.
Probably the other thing I just would want to pick up, and it's actually understanding the difference between the service that we're providing families of essential workers at the college now compared to on-campus learning. So we're actually providing a supervision, a place to enable the essential workers and students at risk a place to go to so that they can then access their remote learning. Whereas when we're on campus learning, of course, we've got a highly structured day where kids are in particular classrooms doing particular subjects at particular time. But I think, again, one of the real, what I really liked about part of your answer, Lynn, was in particular when you said, hey, as a parent, if you're sensing this isn't working or there's something there is a miss, please contact your child's parent, because this is where we'll be able to go, right, we'll make sure things are happening. And so there are a range of people in supporting and guiding students, but they're also dependent upon the input that we're receiving as well. So we would just say, again, this is about communication and working together, because we are walking through a brand new paradigm, a brand new context. And this is one of those things that we just want to continually get better and better at each day. So that's where feedback from you towards us is there. Because as I often say to families, you should never be afraid to ask us a question or come and tell us something, because we're never going to be afraid to come and tell you something if we feel we need to talk to you about that. And then there's a question that says, will the teachers be moving towards more live Canvas classes for selected subjects for primary and secondary schools? I might start with Deb in this space first, Lynn, and just give you again a chance to draw a breath.
Yeah, well, one of the things we've noticed is that the kids really love their live classes, and we've had really high attendance at secondary. And I know I have a primary student at home, and I know that in his day, the most excited thing he is that live conference. But we also know that it's a different dynamic to being live in the classroom. And so there are it's quite an intense period of input from the student, from the teacher. And it's not the same as being in the classroom. So for that to be going all day at secondary is not really appropriate for what we need the students to do. We need them to take the intense input and the discussion and the interaction, and then we need them to go and we need to practice that and put those skills into application. So we've got a balance going of live classes and individual work, and that actually seems to be going very well. It also allows, and I'm sure this is an issue for primary parents as well, it allows for those situations where families cannot have 6 people in the house on conferencing on the internet at once. So it enables that balance and that independent work and that live online work. But we're grateful that our live classes have been well supported by a platform and have gone so well for students.
That's true. That's true.
Yes.
Want to add anything else, Lynn?
Well, I agree, Deb. I think it is the fact that we are trying to deliver the best quality teaching that we can and accessible to all children wherever they're at in the home. So those videos that we're posting and putting up for students to look at any time during the day, we believe at the moment that is the best way for the younger children as they are just coming on board with Canvas. It's certainly something we'll continue to look at as to whether we can have those live classes occurring. But I think 5s and 6s, they're a little bit more older and they can manage that a little bit more too. So certainly we'll be looking at more of that for the primary classes.
I've also noticed that, at least for my child who's in upper primary, as well as the videos and the live classes, there's been some times where small groups of students get together with teachers, and that's been really helpful as well. It's a different dynamic, but it allows the teacher to catch up with those students in a small number, and so that's a wonderful opportunity as well.
I probably would add to it too. Remember, the decision that and the focus that we've made at Heathdale is a blended learning model. So we're not going to be completely online for everything every day, because there are moments when our devices need to be turned off. That the best teaching isn't actually through a device. What I love about Canvas is, even when you said about the videos, Lynn, one of the other pieces of information I've heard is and actually I think you even said this yourself, kids actually going back and watching the video again and again and again and consolidating their learning. And so Canvas gives that opportunity, doesn't it? So that it says that's one of the ways in which we will be using our learning management system known as Canvas. That's how we will continue to deepen and enrich the learning, because kids will actually then have that opportunity to go back and read it. In actual fact, even mums and dads will have that opportunity to go, so what were you taught about today about volcanoes? And so they can actually even see some of the clips and things like that. I think that's really a great way that we can continue to use our sense of using our Canvas and what we've learnt from Canvas from there.
It's such a learning curve, isn't it?
For
Parents and for students.
For sure.
You know, I'm in a situation that I think many parents are in where I haven't been able to give my primary child much attention at all. And I've really, for the first couple of weeks, that resulted in a fairly wobbly situation. But then with some encouragement from his teacher, you know, he started to learn some of those independent skills. And I imagine that a lot of parents are in a really similar situation.
I feel like you've actually started to answer the next question there, Deb. And the question was around, you know, as a full-time working parent, they're struggling to manage that balance between supporting their child in their schoolwork and doing their own work. And in particular, especially the younger kids in that prep to 2 age group, I suppose, that they are not as independent in their learning as the others that we've talked about. And so that sense of fear that and I can get why we have that fear, that their child's going to fall behind because they're missing some of that thing. So, Linda, did you want to add anything to what Deb's just spoken about?
Yes, certainly. So it is a balance. We totally understand that. But sometimes children learn in spite of us, Mr. Grace, I might say. All of a sudden you think, how did that child learn how to read that? But children, as I said, are so flexible. They do get in there and they do learn. They're inquisitive, they're creative. So we want to keep on building on that and helping children just enjoy learning. And there's a number of links and sites that's going through, certainly in LibGuides, in our library resource centre, for children to pop in and do some reading and all those other fun activities. The teachers, again, are the ones that probably have the best advice for your particular age child. So may I encourage you, pop that email through, make that phone call, ask for a phone call to come back to you, and we can certainly talk to you about how best to engage your children. I think when children come back, they'll be just ready to go, and we'll see all the great learning that they actually have done, creative ideas that they've been able to explore.
And sorry, I've just realised that I missed the little last part of that question. So the person who posted that question, my apologies. And they said, what support will be available when they return? And I probably would just simply add that this is what our teachers do. And so because learning is never linear and it's never all consistent. Students will learn at different rates and at different times. And so one of the craft and the art of teaching is actually discerning where each student's at and what is the next step that they need to take and how they can support them. Yes, and that's also the other reason why we've got a learning enhancement department. If a student is actually encountering some significant challenges in learning, this is where our learning enhancement department does support students. And again, parents are very much involved in that decision. But don't let me think that learning enhancement is only about those who are having challenges with learning. The learning enhancement department also speaks into helping really those more able students to actually even push those boundaries a little bit further, Lynn, which is good. So the last question for today comes about, what will happen when the school reopens and when kids are going to be coming back to school? Will it be a staggered opening for some days, or will 1 year level, or will preps be coming back first, or will the whole college open up at the one time? Let me just say, great question. Earlier when I spoke to you about how, and here's two of my team that I've been talking to about, the team and I have been starting to talk through what does a transition plan look like. Those are the questions that we are asking ourselves. I'd love to say to you that I've actually got that plan ready to roll. I don't. We are still working through what is the right sequence for that and what is the right way to do it. As you can see, there doesn't appear to be a right way for anyone, because even if I look at it state by state, they've all done something different across Australia. So one of the key things I've been saying to my team is this: what are the best and the wisest decisions that we could make for Heathdale Christian College community as we move back to campus, whether it be at Werribee or at Melton? What are the decisions that we've got to put in place? What are the steps that we've got to do? And that's what we're working through at the moment. So I can't give you a definitive answer at this point in time, But what I can promise you this is when we've got the plan ready to pass on to you, we will pass that plan on to you. We will explain that plan to you, and then we will start to enact that plan for you. So I wanted to say thanks for all of the great questions. Gee, they were really good, rich questions. And so Joe and Kathy will be remaining online for a little while. So if you still have got other questions, by all means, submit your questions, because Kathy and Joe would be more than happy to answer those. But what I just want to say to you is thank you for joining us today. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to you, as well as be able to answer both of your questions. And I want to say thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Deborah, for joining us. But also thank you to the team who sat behind the scenes and pulled this all together to make this possible. This has really been a great day. God, may you enjoy the rest of this day and this evening. God bless. Goodbye.